Rain hammered the abandoned industrial district of Los Angeles in violent slants, turning every puddle into a trembling mirror of broken neon as Ava Lockwood staggered barefoot through the storm, her breath slicing the cold air in panicked bursts. The factories around her loomed like dead giants against the bruised sky, their shattered windows reflecting flashes of lightning that exposed the truth of her condition. A torn blouse clinging to her trembling frame, bruised ribs that throbbed with every step, scraped palms, and the raw burn of a carved symbol beneath her skin that Granite Equity Group had forced onto her. She ran with the desperation of someone who knew she was hunted, stumbling through a maze of wet asphalt and metal shadows, hearing echoes of the men who had held her down, their threats slithering through her memory like poison. Thunder cracked overhead. Ava flinched, gasping, then collapsed against a stack of wooden pallets, her fingers clawing the ground as she fought to stand again. She had escaped only minutes ago from a hidden warehouse where Granite's enforcers kept her locked away after she accidentally uncovered evidence of their underground operations, and she knew they would come for her. They always did. Granite did not let their secrets walk away. She forced herself forward, vision blurring her body, shaking uncontrollably as cold rain soaked the blood on her shirt. She looked over her shoulder again and again, expecting headlights or footsteps or the metallic click of a gun behind her. But instead, she saw the glare of a sleek black SUV gliding toward her from the far end of the alley. The engine purred too smoothly, too cleanly, too expensively to be random. Panic detonated in her chest. Granite's men used cars like that. They hunted quietly, professionally, efficiently. She tried to run, but her legs buckled, sending her crashing onto the hood of the SUV just as it rolled to a stop. Rain spilled from her hair onto the slick surface beneath her palms, while her vision spun uncontrollably. The engine went silent. The driver's door opened. A tall silhouette stepped into the downpour. Ava trembled violently, gasping, "Just make it fast, please, just make it fast." Her voice barely more than a broken whisper carried by the wind. She squeezed her eyes shut, bracing for the touch. She feared the violence she expected, the return to the nightmare she had barely escaped. But instead of hands grabbing her, she heard slow, cautious footsteps approaching. A voice followed, deep and steady, impossibly calm against the chaos around them. "Hey, open your eyes. I am not going to hurt you." She forced her eyes open, vision still flickering from shock, and saw him standing there under the rain, a man with a charcoal suit drenched through tall and solid. His jaw sharply defined, his dark hair slicked back by the storm. But it was his eyes that froze her. They held the cool control of someone who had seen violence before and survived it. But beneath the coldness, there was something softer, something Ava could not understand. She did not know his name yet, but it was Elias Ward, Billionaire founder of Ward Dynamics and former special operations soldier turned reclusive CEO. To the world, he was a mystery, a man who built an empire on silence and vanished from public life after the death of his younger brother, leaving behind rumors about his unbreakable discipline and dangerous past. But Ava knew none of that. All she saw was a powerful stranger kneeling to her level in the rain. Her instinct screamed danger. She tried to push away from the car, but her strength failed, and she collapsed onto the pavement with a cry curling around her ribs. Elias slowly crouched beside her, raising his hands slightly to show he would not touch her without permission. "You are hurt," he said, scanning her injuries with sharp precision. "Tell me who did this." Ava shook her head violently, her wet hair whipping across her face. "No, no, please. Do not take me back. I will do anything. Just do it fast, please." Something in his expression shifted. Confusion, realization, anger that did not belong to her, but to whoever had harmed her. He swept the alley with a soldier's gaze, assessing potential threats, then looked back at her with an intensity that made the storm seem quiet. "I am not here to take you anywhere," he said, voice steady. "You are safe." She flinched, disbelief tightening her throat. No one is safe from them. He asked who she meant, but she shook her head helplessly, fear choking her words. The rain intensified as lightning illuminated the mark carved into her side, the symbol granite used to control their victims. Elias's eyes darkened with understanding. Without another word, he removed his drenched suit jacket and draped it over her shoulders as gently as if he were placing it on glass. She did not resist when he lifted her, her body limp with exhaustion and terror. He opened the SUV door and helped her inside, then leaned close enough for her to see his eyes clearly behind the veil of rain. "You are safe now," he said quietly. Ava stared at him through trembling lashes, her heartbeat skipping her breath, shallow her mind, unable to reconcile the softness in his voice with the world that had spent months crushing her. She did not understand who he was or why he cared, but the last thing she heard before the darkness finally pulled her under was the same calm voice repeating, "You are safe now." And for the first time since she ran, she wanted to believe it. The rain had slowed by the time Elias Ward pulled the SUV out of the industrial labyrinth and onto the wide, glistening boulevard leading toward downtown Los Angeles. But the storm still clung to the air like static, as if refusing to let go of the chaos he had just driven into. Inside the cabin, Ava Lockwood lay semi-conscious against the leather seat, wrapped in his jacket, trembling every so often, in fear even within sleep, as though the nightmares clawed at her even when her eyes were closed. Elias kept glancing at her between turns, jaw tight, brow furrowed in concentration. On the surface, he looked like a man who felt nothing, whose face was sculpted into cool lines that gave nothing away. But underneath, a storm was building. For years, Elias had been known as the billionaire with the locked heart, the cold king of Ward Dynamics, a company at the top of America's cybersecurity world. Reporters speculated endlessly about why he lived in near total privacy, why he rarely gave interviews, why his smiles never reached his eyes. None of them knew the truth, and he never intended them to. The truth was buried somewhere in the classified files of his military past, in the desert sand of a foreign country, and in the lingering memory of a younger brother who died in his arms because Elias could not save him. After leaving Special Operations, Elias built Ward Dynamics out of nothing but raw discipline, sleepless nights, and an obsession with control, because control was the only thing he had left. Once grief stripped everything else. But even an empire could not silence the memory of that day. Every night at 3 a.m, he woke up to the sound of a gunshot that was no longer real, but still felt as sharp as the moment it first tore his life apart. Every morning he looked in the mirror and saw the man who failed the one person he loved more than anything. So Elias learned to be emotionless, to shut away anything that made him vulnerable. to bury every instinct that reminded him of his past as a protector. And for years it worked. Nothing reached him, nothing broke him. But as he drove with Ava, curled in his jacket, rainwater still drying on her cheeks, he felt something stir in the locked place inside him, something he had not allowed himself to feel in a very long time. Concern, a faint echo of the fierce instinct that once drove him to save lives before he gave up saving his own. He glanced at her again. She looked impossibly young, painfully fragile, her breathing uneven. Every bruise on her skin lit sparks of anger in him, anger that felt unsettlingly familiar. Who had done this to her? What kind of men carved symbols into someone's body and hunted them through the night? He tightened his grip on the steering wheel. Whoever they were, they did not expect her to end up with him. His phone buzzed softly on the console. A message from Marcus Hale, his head of security, asking if Elias still planned to attend the meeting with investors tonight. Elias ignored it. There was no meeting anymore. Not tonight, not after this. He drove straight to Skycrest Tower, the private high-rise he owned in the heart of downtown, a fortress of glass and steel that cut through the skyline like a blade. The building had 3 layers of biometric access, a private elevator coded only to his fingerprints, a rooftop helipad, and a penthouse, equipped with military-grade security systems he personally designed. No one could breach it without him knowing, not even the men who had done this to Ava. When he parked beneath the tower, Elias lifted Ava gently from the seat. She stirred weakly, flinching at the touch, her voice barely audible. "Please, please don't hurt me. I didn't mean to run. I couldn't stay there." His chest tightened. She thought he was like them. He lowered his voice, speaking in the steady, grounding tone he once used to calm terrified civilians overseas. "I am not going to hurt you. I do not know who you think I am, but I promise you this: you are safe with me." She blinked at him, confused, disoriented, terrified. He carried her through the underground entrance, past multiple silent security gates, and into the private elevator. As they ascended toward the penthouse, the faint hum of the elevator filled the silence between them. Ava shivered, curling deeper into his jacket. Elias studied her face again, realizing she did not trust him, not even a little. Why would she? Anyone who came from that alley at that hour, covered in wounds and fear, had every reason to flinch from strangers, especially wealthy ones, especially men in expensive cars, especially men who looked like they had power. To her, he probably looked exactly like the people she was running from. The elevator chimed softly as the doors slid open into the vast glass-walled penthouse. Bright city lights washed over them, contrasting sharply with the darkness she had fled. Ava's eyes fluttered open, taking in the space for a split second before she recoiled. "I know this place. Places like this. They use them too, for... She could not finish. Elias felt something inside him fracture. He set her gently on the couch, keeping distance so she would not panic further. "This is not their place," he said. "No one else has access here. No one knows you are here. And I am not them." Her breath hitched, but she did not argue. She simply curled into a ball, eyes wide, like a wounded animal, bracing for another blow. Elias stood still for several seconds, unsure why the sight of her trembling affected him so deeply. Maybe because she reminded him of someone he once failed. Maybe because she carried the same look of someone who had lost everything and still kept trying to breathe. Or maybe because, despite everything he tried to bury, the protector inside him was waking up again. He let out a slow breath and stepped back, giving her space. But inside the locked heart, everyone believed he had began to shift ever so slightly toward the girl who looked at him as if he were her last threat and her last hope at the same time. A cold soul meeting a broken one. And for the first time in years, Elias felt something real. Hours before Ava collapsed, against the hood of Elias Ward's SUV, the world she thought she understood had already shattered into something unrecognizable. She used to believe Granite Equity Group was nothing more than a towering financial firm with marble floors, glass offices, and endless spreadsheets that made her eyes blur by lunchtime. As a junior data analyst, she blended into the background quietly, sorting through files, running numbers, and keeping her head down in a place where ambition often mattered more than integrity. But that illusion began to crack the night she stumbled across a cluster of encrypted documents buried far too deep inside Granite's internal servers for any analyst to access by accident. Ava had clicked the folder because she thought it held mislabeled financial projections. Instead, line after line of coded transactions bloomed on her screen, each one more suspicious than the last. The numbers did not align with any legitimate business structure. They were linked to offshore accounts, dark web marketplaces, anonymous cryptocurrency transfers, and a hidden registry of assets categorized not by numerical ID, but by initials and gender. She froze. Her instincts screamed that something was terribly wrong. Before she could close the files or alert anyone, the door to her cubicle slammed open. 2 Granite security officers stepped inside their faces, cold, their suits too dark and too tight for corporate work. They said nothing. One simply tapped her keyboard confirming what she had opened, and then the world went black. When Ava woke, she was tied to a metal chair inside a warehouse she had never seen before. The air smelled of gasoline and mildew. A single bulb flickered above her. Her wrists ached. Her throat burned. A man with a voice like gravel leaned toward her, tapping her cheek, lightly, almost mockingly. "Curious girls get hurt," he said. "But lucky for you, we have uses for girls who follow orders." Her stomach twisted. She tried to ask what they wanted, but her voice cracked. Another man approached. He held a small metal instrument that glinted under the bulb's light. "You saw something you should not have seen," he said. "Now you belong to us." Ava struggled until her wrists bled, but they held her down with brutal efficiency. Pain shot through her side as the instrument carved into her skin, slicing a symbol she could not see but could feel burning into her. A mark meant to claim her, silence her, and remind her she was no longer a person in their eyes. She screamed until her voice broke, but no one heard her. No one came. After that time blurred into an unending sequence of fear. She was moved from one warehouse to another, guarded constantly, ordered to keep quiet, forced to eat only when they allowed. It watched like livestock. Every time she tried to rest, she heard footsteps approaching and braced for more pain. Granite did not need walls or chains to imprison someone. They used fear. They used exhaustion. They used the knowledge that they could find her anywhere. "If you run," one man whispered in her ear one night, "we will drag you back by your hair. No one will help you. No one will even believe you. We own everything you touch. We own you." The words burrowed under her skin, deeper than the carved symbol. She believed them. For weeks she lived inside that nightmare, trying to keep her mind from breaking. She watched the guards banter, laugh, gamble, and treat her as if she were a piece of inventory, not a human. At night, she pressed her fingers against the carved mark and prayed she was dreaming. But one afternoon, everything changed. She overheard a conversation through a cracked door. Granite had been preparing to move their most incriminating evidence, and they planned to use her as leverage. If anything goes wrong, one guard said, we trade her. She is the perfect bargaining chip. She will keep certain people quiet. The second man laughed. Yeah, no one wants trouble when they lose their property. That word made something inside Ava snap. She could not let them use her. Not for power, not for silence, not for anything. She waited until nightfall when a storm rumbled over the city. The guards grew careless, bored, restless. The wind masked her movements as she slipped from her restraints. Using a rusted bolt she had slowly pried loose from her chair over the past 2 days. Her heart pounded so loudly she feared they would hear it. Every breath felt like glass in her lungs. Lightning illuminated the exits. Thunder drowned her footsteps. She slipped through a side door, sprinting into the rain. Barefoot, the cold slicing into her skin like knives. Behind her, shouts erupted. She ran anyway, past chain-link fences, through muddy fields, across the edge of the industrial maze. Her ribs screamed. Her wound burned, but she did not stop. She ran until her legs buckled, then forced herself up again. She ran because she knew if they caught her, she would never escape again. And when she saw headlights cutting through the rain and a sleek black SUV approaching at a slow, deliberate pace, her terror spiked. Granite drove cars like that. Granite hunted quietly. Granite had found her. By the time the SUV reached her, she was barely standing. Her body shaking violently. She collapsed onto the hood, convinced this was the end. That is why she whispered those words. Just make it fast. She thought the driver was one of them. Someone sent to bring her back, to punish her, to silence her forever. But instead fate had delivered her into the path of Elias Ward, the last man she expected, and the only man who would change everything. Elias Ward had carried many people in his lifetime. Some bleeding, some terrified, some moments away from death. But none of them had ever clung to his consciousness the way Ava Lockwood did as he lifted her trembling body from the rain-slick pavement into the warmth of his SUV. The storm outside thrashed against the windows, wind howling like a warning, but inside the cabin there was only the sharp sound of her ragged breathing and the frantic rise and fall of her chest, as if her body had not yet realized it was no longer running for its life. She pushed weakly against him, at first her palms slipping on his shirt, her voice raw with panic as she whispered, "Let me go, please. I have money. I can disappear. Just don't take me back." He froze, stunned by the desperation in her tone. "I am not one of them," he murmured, but she shook her head violently, her wet hair sticking to her face as she trembled. "You have cars like they do. Watches like they do, power like they do. Just don't sell me back. Please." The words sliced something in him. Elias had lived through bloodshed and through battles that branded themselves into memory. But nothing prepared him for the way this woman looked at him, not with hatred, not with defiance, but with the hollow certainty of someone who believed kindness didn't exist in the world she came from. He drove fast but smooth toward Skycrest Tower, his private fortress in the clouds, dialing his private physician, Dr. Ellison, with one hand. "I need you at the penthouse immediately," he said. "No delays?" Ellison tried to ask questions, but Elias had already ended the call, his gaze sliding back to Ava, who clutched her ribs as another tremor of pain rippled through her. When they arrived, he carried her past the security gates, through the elevator, and into the penthouse, all without letting her feet touch the ground. The moment she felt the air change, she stiffened, panic overtaking her again. "Please don't lock the door. Please don't tie me up. I did what they asked. I didn't tell anyone." Elias knelt beside her as she curled into the corner of the couch, her eyes wild, her fingers trembling uncontrollably. "Ava," he said softly, carefully pronouncing her name. After reading it from her work ID, still clipped to her ruined blouse, "No one is going to tie you up. No one is going to take you anywhere." She looked at him as if he were speaking an impossible language. "You're lying. Men like you always lie." Before he could respond, Dr. Ellison arrived carrying a medical case. The doctor approached slowly, scanning Ava's condition. "Multiple contusions, possible cracked rib. We need to check her abdomen." When Ellison reached to lift the hem of her torn shirt, Ava recoiled violently, scrambling back. So fast she nearly fell off the couch. "Don't touch me, please." Elias immediately raised a hand between her and the doctor. "Ellison, stop." His tone was controlled, but his eyes were sharp with warning. He turned to Ava, lowering himself until he was eye level with her, his voice steady and gentle in a way that seemed foreign even to him. "You are in control here. No one touches you unless you say so." She blinked, breathing hard, confusion flickering across her face as if she had never been offered a choice before. Slowly, hesitantly, she nodded. "Just be careful," she whispered. Ellison proceeded with caution, narrating every movement. But when he lifted the side of her shirt, the air in the room shifted instantly. Elias's whole body went still. Carved into her skin was a small crude line of encoded symbols, granite's mark fresh enough to still be inflamed, deep enough to speak of cruelty, unmistakable enough that anyone familiar with underground financial rings would recognize its meaning. Ellison swallowed hard. "This is not an accident," he said quietly. Elias felt a slow, cold burn rise in his chest. He knew granite, had fought to expose them years ago, had lost more than he could afford in the process, and now that same organization had carved into this woman's flesh as if she were an object. Ava turned her face away, shaking. "They said, even if I escaped, no one would want something already marked." Her voice broke, collapsing into a whisper. "They said belonging ends with choice, and I have none left." Elias's jaw tightened, the muscles flexing with barely controlled fury. He had heard many things in war zones, but nothing quite like that. "They were wrong," he said, his voice low and certain. "You are not property." She closed her eyes, tears sliding silently down her face as Ellison cleaned and bandaged her wound. When the doctor finished, Elias guided him to the far end of the room. "She needs safety above all else," Ellison said softly. "Whoever did that, if they think she escaped, they will come looking." Elias already knew. He had seen it forming from the moment he saw her in the rain. But now the truth was carved into her skin, proof that she was not just a victim, but a target. And something deep within him clicked into place, the dormant protector inside him, rising with silent, unshakable resolve. When he returned to Ava, she had curled herself into the smallest shape possible, as if trying to disappear into his couch. He crouched beside her again, his voice steady. "Ava, listen to me. You are not going back to them. Not tonight. Not ever." She looked up at him with disbelief, her voice barely a whisper. "Why would you help me?" Elias felt the truth press against his throat, something he had not spoken aloud in years. "Because someone once helped me when I did not deserve it," he said quietly. "And I could not save him, but I can save you." Her breath trembled, her eyes softening for the first time, not with trust, not yet, but with the faintest spark of something he had not seen in her at all. Until this moment, the possibility that safety might be real. Elias stood slowly. "You're safe now," he said again. And for the first time since she had run into the night, Ava did not flinch when he said it. Ava Lockwood did not sleep that night, not even for a minute, no matter how soft the lights were, no matter how warm the penthouse air felt. Compared to the cold alley she had escaped, no matter how many times Elias told her she was safe, she sat curled on the edge of the oversized couch, knees pulled to her chest beneath the blanket. He had wrapped around her eyes wide and vacant as she watched shadows move across the glass walls from passing airplanes and city lights. Every sound made her flinch. Every creak of the building, every distant siren, every shift in the air pushed her heartbeat into frantic territory. Elias watched from the hallway at a distance, giving her space, but unable to leave her completely alone. He had turned on the penthouse's 12-layer security system, each layer sealing her deeper into a fortress that no one could breach without him knowing. "You see this," Elias said quietly when he returned to her holding a small remote that controlled the entire system. He pressed a button and the windows shifted from transparent to opaque. Another button and metal barriers silently descended behind the glass. Another and the doors locked with a solid thud. Ava's breath hitched. "Please don't lock me in," she whispered. He paused immediately. "You are not locked in," he murmured. "Everything can be opened again. You will see." He undid each barrier slowly, letting her watch the mechanisms reverse, ensuring she understood she was not trapped. Still, she shook with fear. Elias sat across from her, making sure not to sit too close. "No one can get in here," he said gently. "Not Granite, not anyone." The name made her shiver, as if ice ran down her spine. "They always get in," she whispered. "They always find a way." He wanted to argue, wanted to reassure her, but he realized reassurance meant nothing against trauma carved into a human being. Instead, Elias softened his voice. "If they come looking for you, they will find me instead." Her gaze lifted at that, confused. Her voice cracked. "Why would you want that?" He looked away, jaw tightening. "Because I know what men like them do. And because what they did to you will not happen again." Ava lowered her eyes, pulling the blanket tighter around her shoulders. For a long while, silence stretched between them, fragile but necessary. The kind of silence where two damaged souls learned how to occupy the same space without shattering. Eventually, the trembling in her hands eased. "They kept the lights on all night," she whispered suddenly, as if the words slipped out without her permission. Elias's head lifted slightly. Why she swallowed hard. "So we couldn't sleep. Sleep makes you strong. They wanted us too tired to think, too tired to run." Elias's chest tightened. There were others. Ava nodded faintly. "3 women before me, 1 after. Where are they now?" She shook her head. "Gone." Elias felt something inside him, fracture, rage, sorrow, responsibility, all merging in a way that felt as dangerous as it was protective. "You do not have to tell me everything tonight," he said softly. "Only what you want to say." She exhaled shakily. Eyes distant. "I don't know what I want. I don't even know who I am anymore." He thought for a moment before answering. You are Ava, and you are free from them now, even if it does not feel like it yet. Her eyes flickered at the word free, as if it were a language she once knew but forgot how to speak. But eventually, slowly, the words began to come out of her in fragments, memories, broken pieces of the last few months, moments she had locked away just to survive. Elias listened silently as she told him about the coded data. She uncovered the way Granite's men dragged her to the warehouse, the endless nights of fear, the symbol carved into her skin, the way they used women as leverage, and the threats they whispered into her ear every time she tried to breathe. Each detail tightened his jaw further, his fists clenching, despite his effort to remain calm for her sake. But it was when she hesitated, fingers rubbing her side through the blanket, that Elias leaned forward just slightly. Ava, he said gently, may I see the mark again? Only if you want. She looked torn, her breath catching her shoulders, tensing like she expected pain. But after several seconds, she nodded shakily. Okay. He waited unmoving as she slowly lifted the blanket and fingered the hem of her shirt. Her hand trembled violently. Elias turned his head away slightly. You can do it when you're ready, he murmured. She swallowed, braced herself, then pushed the fabric up just enough for him to see the bandage Dr. Ellison had wrapped. Even through the gauze, the shape of the scar was clear. A series of jagged, encoded symbols cut deep enough to never fully fade. Ava's voice cracked. It's always going to be there. I'm always going to be marked. Something in Elias's expression softened in a way that felt rare even to him. He shifted forward a little, not touching her, not crowding her, just close enough that she could hear the sincerity in his voice. Scars do not decide who you are, he said. They tell a story, but you get to choose what that story becomes. Her eyes filled with tears. It hurts to look at. Then let it hurt for now, he said softly. Healing always starts with the parts we want to hide. She blinked, hard tears clinging to her lashes, and lowered the fabric again. Elias stood slowly and turned off the overhead lights, leaving only the soft glow of a small lamp, casting warm amber hues across the room. Try to rest, he murmured. I will be right here. Please don't leave. The words escaped her before she realized she'd said them. Elias froze, studying her face, seeing the rawness there. He nodded once. I won't. He sat in the armchair across from the couch, close enough for her to see him, far enough to give her space. For the next hour, Ava fought sleep, eyes fluttering open every time a sound startled her. A distant honk, the hum of the elevator shaft, the soft whir of the air system. Her breath stuttered each time, panic flaring briefly before fading when she saw him still there. Finally, when exhaustion overcame fear, she drifted off body, curling into the blanket. Even in sleep, her brow remained furrowed, shadows of nightmares tightening her expression. Elias watched her quietly. He did not understand why she mattered to him already. He did not understand why her brokenness made something in him want to stand guard through the night. All he knew was this: she needed safety, and safety was something he could give. Not because he was a billionaire, not because he had power, but because once, long ago, he had promised someone he would save whoever he could. And for the first time in years, he was keeping that promise again. As rain tapped gently against the glass walls and the city lights shimmered across the room, Elias whispered into the quiet, as if speaking to a ghost of the past and a fragile soul in the present at the same time. No one will hurt you again, Ava. Not while I'm breathing. Morning came slowly, to the penthouse the kind of muted gray dawn that slipped between buildings and softened the sharp edges of downtown Los Angeles. But Ava Lockwood woke long before the sunlight touched the glass walls. She sat upright on the couch, clutching the blanket to her chest, breath shaking as if she had been running even in her dreams. Elias Ward was already awake, standing near the kitchen island with a cup of black coffee in his hand, his posture straight, his expression composed but tense beneath the surface. He had not slept. He had spent the night watching her sleep, listening to the slightest noises outside the penthouse, analyzing every shift in the building's security system, feeling something restless and unfamiliar claw at him. Ava's eyes flicked toward him, uncertain, almost timid. "It's morning," she whispered. Elias nodded. "You slept for a few hours." She glanced around, startled, as if expecting the walls to crumble and Granite's men to burst inside. Elias stepped carefully toward her, keeping distance, but lowering his voice to something steady and grounding. "The system didn't detect any breaches," he said. "No one came looking during the night." But even as he said the words, the muscles along his jaw tightened. Something felt wrong. Something too quiet, too still. He had learned long ago in deserts and jungles, in the blood-soaked alleys of foreign cities, that silence was often the first sign of danger. While Ava sipped the water he handed her with trembling fingers, Elias checked the penthouse's camera feed on his phone. That was when he saw it, a tall man in a charcoal coat, standing in the marble lobby of Skycrest Tower. The man wasn't a resident, he wasn't a guest, he wasn't security. But he had walked straight up to the front desk and calmly asked the receptionist, "Has a young woman come in recently? She might be injured. She may have run here. Her name is Ava Lockwood." Elias's blood went cold. The receptionist, unaware of Ava's situation, politely responded that no guests had been logged, but the man lingered with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Elias recognized that smile, predatory, calculated, Granite. Ava noticed the shift in Elias's expression immediately. What happened?" she asked, voice tightening. Elias hesitated, not wanting to ignite her panic. But he had never believed in lying to someone who was already drowning in fear. "Someone is looking for you downstairs," he said softly. Ava's face drained of color. Her hands shook violently, the water glass slipping from her grasp and shattering against the floor. "They found me," she whispered, breath quickening into sharp gasps. "I told you, they always find me. I told you." Elias crossed the room in 2 strides, stopping just short of touching her. "Ava, look at me," he said with the quiet authority he once used to pull soldiers out of shock. "You are safe. They cannot get past the first floor." She shook her head frantically. "You don't understand. They have people everywhere, money everywhere. They own police. They own judges. They will come for me, and they won't stop until they are not getting to you," Elias repeated, firmer now. He pulled up the building's internal logs. No unauthorized access, no alerts, no signs of intrusion. But his instincts screamed that this was only the beginning. Granite did not wander. Granite hunted. And if one of their men was here, then more would follow. Ava pressed a hand over her ribs, doubling over, as if the old wound throbbed in response to her terror. Elias resisted the urge to touch her, to steady her, to anchor her. He kept his hands at his sides, but lowered his voice into something deep and steady. "Ava, listen to me. You are not alone anymore." Her breathing slowed just barely. He continued, "Years ago, my company investigated financial crimes. Granite was on that list. We were close to exposing them once. She looked at him through wide, trembling eyes. What happened? Elias exhaled slowly. They retaliated. Someone I cared about got caught in the crossfire. I could not prove anything. Her eyes softened in a different kind of fear for him. Why would you help me then, if they hurt you before? His gaze turned sharp-focused. Because you are the piece they never expected. You are the missing link. With you alive, with what you know, with what they did, Granite can finally fall. Ava stared at him for several seconds, her mind trying to accept that she was not just prey anymore. She was evidence. Dangerous evidence. Her voice shook. So now they'll come after you too? Elias didn't deny it. Instead, he said, let them try. And there it was, the flicker of his old self. The soldier. The man who used to run toward danger, not away from it. The man who built an empire so he would never again be powerless. Ava's throat tightened. I don't want anyone else getting hurt because of me. You didn't cause any of this, Elias said. They did. His phone vibrated again. A message from Marcus Hale, head of security. The man from the lobby left, but he was scanning the cameras. He disabled one on the east wall. Not normal. Elias's stomach hardened. Granite was probing the perimeter, testing, searching. We need to be prepared, Elias murmured mostly to himself. Ava hugged her arms around herself, her voice barely audible. What do we do now? Elias turned to her with the steady calm of someone who had survived nightmares before. Now he said we protect you, and we prepare for the moment they come back. Her breath caught at the word protect, as if it were a foreign concept she didn't know how to receive. But when Elias looked at her, really looked at her, she felt something shift inside her chest, something she had buried long ago. The faint, fragile spark of trust. He saw it too. And for the first time since he brought her into his world, Elias Ward knew one thing with absolute certainty. Granite Equity Group had made a fatal mistake. They had harmed the wrong woman. And now she was under his protection. Ava Lockwood spent the next 2 days in the penthouse of Skycrest Tower, but time moved strangely there, stretching and collapsing in uneven waves, as if her mind could not decide whether she was safe or still trapped in the nightmare she had escaped. She stayed mostly in the living room, curled beneath the blanket Elias had given her, always facing the door, always flinching at the slightest noise. Elias Ward moved through the vast penthouse with deliberate softness, keeping his presence steady but never intrusive, as though he understood instinctively how easily fear could snap the fragile thread holding her together. He placed food on the coffee table without forcing her to take it, leaving the plates there until she dared to try a bite. He set water beside her each time he walked past. He dimmed the lights at night because she whispered that bright lights kept her awake, but complete darkness terrified her. So he crafted a warm twilight throughout the penthouse, a soft amber glow that neither blinded nor frightened her. She tried to sleep on the couch, but each time she closed her eyes, tremors rippled through her body, and she woke gasping, whispering half-formed apologies, as if expecting punishment for dreaming. Elias moved from room to room on silent feet, giving her the illusion of solitude, but never letting her be alone. She began to notice it the way he always positioned himself, somewhere she could see him from the corner of her eye, never too close, never too far. A quiet guardian, a steady presence. She told herself it meant nothing that she shouldn't rely on anyone, that safety was temporary. But it was impossible to ignore the strange comfort that flickered whenever she saw him, standing near the balcony, arms crossed gaze, scanning the streets below. He was watching for Granite, watching for danger, watching for her. On the second night, a storm rolled over the city, thunder rumbling in the distance like approaching footsteps. Ava tensed immediately, the blanket slipping from her shoulders as her breath grew shallow. Elias noticed. He set aside the file he'd been reading and approached, slowly stopping several feet away. "Storm's just weather," he murmured. "Nothing else." She hugged her knees tighter. "Storms sound like doors opening, like boots, like—" She trailed off, unable to speak the rest. Elias understood anyway. "Nothing gets past the security system," he said. "Nothing gets past me." His voice was calm enough to slow her breathing at least for a moment. But when lightning struck across the skyline, illuminating the room with a harsh white flash, she flinched violently and stumbled off the couch, bolting toward the balcony as if searching for an escape route. Rain pelted against the glass wall in sharp, angry bursts. Ava pressed her palms to the glass, breathing hard, her reflection distorted by the water streaming down. Elias followed but stayed near the doorway, his voice steady. "Ava, look at me." She didn't at first. Her heart raced too fast, her thoughts too tangled. But eventually she turned her eyes shining with fear. "They're coming. I know they are. It doesn't matter how many locks or cameras you have. They always find us." Elias shook his head slowly. "They will not get to you. Not while you're here." "You can't promise that," she whispered. "Yes," he said, "I can." There was something terrifyingly certain in his voice, something immovable. His past, his military precision, his training, his losses, shaped every syllable. Ava wrapped her arms around herself, shivering as the storm raged behind her. Elias took one step forward, then stopped, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. She didn't. "Ava," he said quietly, "you are safe now." The words hit her harder than the thunder. Safe. She didn't know what that felt like anymore. She didn't trust the word, didn't trust herself, didn't trust hope. Yet the way he said it, calm, steady, certain, sent warmth spreading through the cold hollow beneath her ribs. "Why are you doing this?" she whispered. Elias's gaze softened. "Because I know what it looks like when someone stops believing they're worth saving." Her breath caught in her throat. She looked down at her hands, the same hands that reached for him in the rain without realizing it, the same hands that trembled when she tried to eat, the same hands she'd used to claw her way out of Granite's prison. "I don't know who I am anymore," she admitted. "You are someone who survived," he said. "That's who you are." She pressed a hand to her chest as if trying to hold herself together. "I'm still scared," good Elias said softly. "Fear keeps you alive, but it does not get to define you." A faint, broken laugh escaped her, more a breath than a sound. "I don't think I've laughed in months. You don't have to force anything here," he murmured. For a moment they simply looked at each other, the world shrinking to the soft glow of city lights and the rhythm of rain against the glass. Something shifted in the space between them, subtle but undeniable, the seed of something fragile and human, something that had nothing to do with fear. She stepped back from the balcony door, hugging the blanket tighter. "Will you stay in the room?" she asked quietly. "Not close, just somewhere I can see you when I wake up." Elias nodded once. "I'll stay." He moved to the armchair beside the couch, sitting with the steady posture of someone trained to remain alert, even in rest. Ava lay back down, pulling the blanket over her shoulders. Her breathing slowed as she watched him, his profile calm his gaze, vigilant, his presence grounding in a way she could not explain. For the first time since her escape, she drifted into sleep without fighting it. And when lightning flashed again, illuminating the room, Ava's eyes fluttered open. But this time she saw Elias still in the chair watching over her. She closed her eyes again. Safe. The unfamiliar word echoed softly in her chest, and in the stillness of that storm-lit room, two locked hearts, hers shattered by fear, his frozen by grief, began to thaw in ways neither of them could yet understand. Ava Lockwood woke on the third morning with the faintest clarity she had felt in weeks, as though her mind had finally surfaced from a deep, brutal ocean and caught a breath of air that did not taste like fear. But the moment she shifted, pain radiated from her ribs, reminding her that safety was temporary and her past was still stitched beneath her skin. She pushed herself upright blanket, falling into her lap, and found Elias Ward standing near the penthouse's towering window phone. In hand, his expression carved in that silent, calculating calm she was beginning to recognize as something more than coldness. It was vigilance. The morning light cut across his face, catching the faint shadows beneath his eyes. He hadn't slept again. He turned when he heard her stir. "How do you feel?" he asked. His voice was low, steady, not gentle but grounded, like something she could lean on without collapsing. "Like I'm still running," she whispered. Elias walked closer, leaving a respectful distance. "Then let's slow down the world for a moment." She tried to muster a smile, but her throat tightened instead. Because slowing down meant remembering, and remembering meant she inhaled shakily. "Elias, something happened before I escaped. Something important. I didn't want to say it until I knew I wouldn't fall apart." He nodded once, giving her silence to fill with courage. She twisted her hands together, heart hammering. "The night before I ran, Granite's executives were in the warehouse, all of them. I wasn't supposed to see them, but one of the guards shoved open the wrong door and I heard them talking." Elias's posture sharpened. About what Ava swallowed hard, her voice trembling as she forced the memory to surface. "They said they were trading something with a government official. Data, leverage, something big. And they said they needed me as insurance in case the deal went wrong." Her breathing quickened. "I wasn't just a prisoner. I was a bargaining chip. They were planning to move me to another location, somewhere more secure, somewhere I would never escape from." Elias's jaw tightened, a flicker of lethal calm crossing his features. "They wanted to use you in a federal transaction." Ava nodded, tears pressing at the corners of her eyes. "I think they were going to kill me after. They said once the deal was done, I'd served my purpose." Elias exhaled slowly, but the sound held the weight of a storm. "Ava," he said quietly, "what you heard is not just important, it's enough to bury Granite." She stared at him, startled, but it was just words. "I don't have proof, you are the proof," he said decisively. "Your testimony, your knowledge of their locations, the branding they carved into you, the timing of their shipments, the internal logs you accessed. You are the missing link that no one else had." Her breath caught. She looked away, voice fractured. "That's why they won't stop. Because if I live, everything they built falls apart." Elias stepped closer, not touching her, but close enough that she could feel the quiet power radiating from him like heat. "That is why you cannot stay here," he said. Ava's head snapped up, panic flooding her chest. "What, you're sending me away?" "I'm taking you somewhere safer," he corrected. "This penthouse is secure, But Granite already sent someone to the building. They're probing, testing boundaries, looking for weaknesses. It's only a matter of time before they escalate. She clutched the blanket, heart racing. Where would we go? Elias held her gaze for several seconds before answering. Malibu. My private coastal residence. It's isolated, heavily fortified. Only 2 people in the world know about it. And Granite is not one of them. Ava hesitated, the relief colliding sharply inside her. Will you come with me? The question slipped out before she could swallow it. Elias's eyes softened in the smallest, quietest way. I will not let you go anywhere alone, he said. Not now. Not while they're hunting you. A tremor moved through her, not fear but something warmer, deeper, terrifying in a different way. She nodded. Okay. Within an hour, Elias had packed a small bag for her with new clothes he ordered overnight. Soft and simple, so nothing would scrape her injuries. He handed the bag to her carefully, almost reverently. Ava changed in the guest bathroom, pausing only once when she caught her reflection in the mirror. Hair-tangled eyes bruised with exhaustion, vulnerability, carved into every line of her face. She barely recognized the woman staring back. But then she remembered Elias's words. Healing starts with the parts we want to hide. She took a breath and stepped out. Elias stood at the door, leather jacket, on phone in hand, coordinating security with Marcus Hale in a series of clipped instructions. Private route, no stops, scramble surveillance. He ended the call and looked at her, something shifting in his gaze. Approval, maybe, or respect. Ready? He asked. She nodded, even though her hands were shaking. They took a private elevator to the underground garage and entered a different vehicle, a dark armored SUV that hummed with quiet strength. As they drove, the city faded into coastal cliffs and open sky, but Ava's mind grew heavier with every mile. I didn't mean for any of this, she whispered. I never wanted you dragged into. Elias didn't let her finish. Ava, I've been dragged into worse by men far less deserving of protection. You are not a burden. You are a witness, and you matter. Her throat tightened. She looked out the window to hide the emotion building behind her eyes. Hours later, Malibu's ocean came into view, its vast blue expanse, stretching beneath the sun like a promise she couldn't yet trust. Elias turned down a private road carved into the cliffside and stopped before a modern seaside residence, protected by layers of invisible security. When Ava stepped inside, the soft crash of waves hit her like a memory. She never had a moment of peace, so foreign she didn't know how to accept it. But when Elias locked the final security panel and turned toward her, his gaze steady and unwavering, she felt something inside her shift. Not safety, not yet, but the faintest belief that she might someday stop running from the truth and start running toward her life again. The Malibu residence felt nothing like the cold Billionaire's mansions Ava Lockwood had seen on television. Instead, it wrapped around her like a quiet sanctuary carved into the cliffs, with sweeping glass walls that overlooked the endless Pacific waves, crashing below like a heartbeat she could finally hear without fear. Still even surrounded by light and ocean air, Ava moved through the house cautiously, almost timidly, as if a single wrong step would shatter the fragile calm Elias Ward had built for her. He gave her space, but remained close, never letting her drift too far into silence or too close to panic. On the first morning, she stepped outside onto the wooden deck, the ocean breeze brushing her hair back, sunlight touching her skin for the first time in weeks without bars between her and the sky. She inhaled deeply, but winced as the movement tugged at her rib. Elias, standing by the kitchen doorway with a mug in hand, watched her with a mixture of relief and concern. "You don't have to go out there alone," he said softly. Ava turned, unsure whether he meant the deck or the world at large. "I need to remember what it feels like to breathe," she murmured. "I know," Elias replied. "Just do it slowly." And she tried. She tried for hours. She walked the perimeter of the deck with careful steps, touched the glass railing, as if confirming it was solid, pressed a hand against her chest every time a sudden noise from the waves startled her. Elias didn't hover, but she always felt him near like a steady presence. She didn't have to look at to know he was watching her back. Later that afternoon, as she rested on the couch with a blanket over her legs, Elias returned from the gym with a first aid kit and something else, a small black case. "What's that?" she asked, tensing instinctively. Elias placed it on the table with deliberate gentleness. "Tools for self-defense," he said. She shook her head quickly. "I don't want weapons." "This isn't a weapon," he corrected. "It's a tool, non-lethal. It's a way to make sure fear doesn't own you." Her fingers twitched as he opened the case. Inside was a small, compact device with a safety grip designed to incapacitate without killing. "I'll never force you," Elias said, reading the hesitation on her face. "But learning to defend yourself is power Granite never wanted you to have." She stared at the device, memories flooding men's laughter, the sting of metal against her skin, the feeling of being nothing more than a thing. And suddenly she hated it, hated the fear, hated the trembling, hated the mark carved into her side. "Teach me," she whispered. Elias nodded once, then guided her outside to the training mat he kept on the deck. The ocean wind tangled her hair as he showed her the basic stance grip aim. He never touched her without warning, moving slowly, speaking softly, so his voice anchored her rather than startled her. "Like this," he said, demonstrating how to hold the device properly. Ava mirrored his stance, legs shaky but determined. "Good," Elias murmured, "now again." They trained for nearly an hour, and though her arms trembled and her breath came in uneven bursts, she felt something she hadn't felt in months, strength returning inch by inch through the cracks of her fear. When she finally managed to activate the device correctly, its sharp click cut through the air like a victory she didn't expect. She looked up at him, surprised by her own progress. Elias gave her a rare, faint smile, small, subtle, but real. "You're getting stronger," he said quietly. "Not because of this, because of you." Her chest tightened. She turned away quickly, biting back tears she didn't want him to see. But Elias saw them anyway. He always did. Later that evening, when the sun dipped into the horizon, painting the ocean gold, Ava found herself sitting beside him on the deck steps. The silence between them felt different now, softer, less heavy, as if the space they shared was slowly learning how to hold something other than fear. "Why help me this much?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "You could have dropped me at a hospital, called the police, walked away." Elias kept his eyes on the horizon. "Because when I looked at you that night," he said slowly, "I saw someone who had been taken apart piece by piece. And I know what it feels like to lose yourself." Ava turned to him, curiosity and something warmer mixing in her eyes. "Because of your brother?" His jaw tightened, but he didn't hide from the question. He trusted a man he shouldn't have, someone involved with Granite's early operations. "I was overseas when it happened. By the time I got back..." His voice faded into the sound of waves. Ava's breath caught. "I'm sorry. It wasn't your fault," he said. She blinked. "You don't even know me." Elias turned, then meeting her gaze. His eyes as steady as the ocean behind him. "I know enough," he whispered. Ava felt something shift inside her, something fragile and warm and terrifying, because it felt like hope. She looked down at her hands, fingers curling slightly. "Thank you," she said softly, "for not treating me like I'm broken." "You're not broken," Elias replied. "You're healing." A single tear fell down her cheek, and this time she didn't hide it. For a moment that felt suspended in time, they simply sat there, two people, shaped by pain, bound by loss, anchored by an unexpected connection neither of them fully understood yet. And as the waves crashed softly below, Ava realized something she hadn't dared consider before. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was beginning to live again. And Elias Ward, with his quiet strength and locked heart slowly thawing, was becoming the reason she no longer felt alone in the dark. The night granite came, for Ava Lockwood began, deceptively soft, with Malibu's ocean breathing in slow rhythmic waves, and the sky painted in muted shades of violet and charcoal. Ava had just finished a warm shower steam, still clinging to her skin, when she stepped barefoot onto the cool wooden floor of the coastal house. Elias Ward stood near the dining table, reviewing encrypted documents on his tablet, his posture tense in a way she had come to recognize. His instincts were alert, listening for things she couldn't detect. The house was quiet, but Elias's silence was sharper than usual, too controlled, too focused. Ava sensed it immediately. "Something's wrong," she whispered. Elias didn't look up at first. Instead, his jaw tightened as he zoomed into security logs on his screen. "The southern camera went offline 20 minutes ago," he said quietly. "Could be a glitch." Ava felt the cold ripple of dread crawl up her spine. Or granite. Elias lifted his gaze to her steady, serious, protective in a way that could melt steel. "It might be nothing, but we prepare for everything." He moved with military precision, crossing the house to activate additional perimeter locks. Ava followed him, careful, her ribs aching with each step, her breath picking up as she watched him slide into a mode she hadn't seen: fully calculated, efficient, dangerous. "Elias," she whispered, "what if they're already here?" He paused, listening, and in the silence that followed, they both heard it, the muffled crunch of gravel outside, then another heavier, closer boots, synchronized, purposeful. Not neighbors, not random hikers, not the ocean wind. Elias's voice dropped to a low, commanding whisper. "Ava, go to the safe room. Now." Panic stabbed through her. "No, Elias, I'm not leaving you." "This isn't a negotiation," he said, already pressing a code on the wall panel. "They came for you. That means they won't stop." She grabbed his arm before she realized she'd moved. "If they hurt you because of me." He looked at her, then really looked, his eyes fierce and full of something raw. "I'm not dying tonight," he said, "and neither are you. Go." Her breath shook, but she obeyed, backing toward the hallway as Elias positioned himself between her and the entrance, his body, the shield she didn't ask for but desperately needed. Then the knock came. Not a frantic banging, a slow, deliberate knock. 3 taps, a pause, 2 taps. Elias's fingers tightened around the concealed weapon he kept holstered at his side, not lethal but powerful enough to disable anyone who got too close. "Ava," he murmured again into the safe room. She took one step back, then another, but froze when a voice drifted through the door. "Federal Bureau of Investigation." "Open the door." Elias's jaw clenched. "They're not FBI." Ava shook her head violently. Granite has people who pretend to be FBI. They did it to the others. Elias pressed a button and a small security display flickered, showing the front steps. 4 men in tactical jackets marked with fake FBI insignias stood in formation. Their stances were wrong, too rigid, too rehearsed, too heavy. They were pretending to be law enforcement, but their eyes were predator eyes. "I know it's you," Ava, the one in front, called. "We're here to escort you to safety." "Mr. Ward, we know she's in there." Elias stepped closer to the door, voice low but lethal. "You're trespassing on private property. Leave now." The man chuckled lightly as if amused. "We have federal authority." "No," Elias said. "You have cheap patches and a death wish." A subtle click sounded from the door and Ava gasped. "They're unlocking it," she whispered. "They shouldn't be able to." They hacked the external panel. Elias spat, already moving. "Go, Ava. Safe room, now." She ran down the hallway, ribs screaming as she darted into the safe room, which sealed behind her with a heavy magnetic lock. Through the small, reinforced window, she saw Elias turn, just as the door burst open, and the men surged inside like a black wave. "Find the girl," the leader barked. "She belongs to us." Ava's knees buckled. She pressed both hands to the glass, whispering, "No, no." Elias moved faster than she'd ever seen him, precise, trained, ruthless, in a way that was terrifying and mesmerizing all at once. He disarmed the first man instantly with a calculated strike to the wrist, sending the fake agent's weapon skidding across the hardwood floor. The second man lunged, but Elias dodged, delivering a sharp blow to the jaw that sent the intruder crashing into the wall. But there were too many, too coordinated, too prepared. The leader raised a stun weapon and fired in Elias's direction. The crackle lit the room. Ava screamed as the bolt grazed Elias's side, forcing him back. "Stop it!" she cried, pounding on the glass. One of the men kicked open the guest bedroom, scanning for her. "She's here somewhere. Granite wants the girl alive." Elias used the distraction to move again, slamming his shoulder into the leader and pinning him against the wall. "She doesn't belong to you," Elias growled between clenched teeth. "She never did." "She's marked," the man hissed back. "You can't erase that." Ava's breath fractured. Her legs gave out, and she slid down against the wall of the safe room, tears burning her eyes. Elias fought like a man with nothing to lose and everything to protect. He disabled 2 more men, movements sharp and furious, but the leader regained footing and charged again. The reenacted violence triggered Ava's panic violently. Her heart raced, her vision blurred, and she clawed at the floor, screaming Elias's name. Through the glass, she saw one of the intruders raise a metal baton, swinging it toward Elias's head. "No," she sobbed. Something inside her snapped. She hit the emergency override inside the safe room, a function meant for law enforcement. But her desperation didn't care. The door unsealed. She stumbled out just as the baton cracked against Elias's shoulder, sending him to one knee. "Elias," she cried, rushing toward him. He looked up, pain etched across his face, sweat glistening at his brow, and the sight of her outside the safe room made his expression twist in a mixture of fury and fear. "Ava, get back," he shouted. But it was too late. The leader saw her, smiled. "There you are," he sneered. "Granite's property." Those words shattered something inside Elias. With a primal force she had never seen, he surged upward, tackling the man before he could reach her. The two crashed against the wall, Elias's fists moving, with a precision born from grief and training and a rage older than this fight. Ava backed against the hallway wall, trembling as she watched Elias take blow after blow but refuse to fall. Finally, with a brutal twist, he disarmed the leader and slammed him to the ground. Sirens wailed faintly in the distance, real ones this time. Backup Elias had secretly triggered minutes earlier. Granite's men scrambled. 2 fled through the open door. The leader staggered to his feet, clutching his bruised jaw. "This isn't over," he spat at Elias. "She belongs to us." "Not anymore," Elias growled. The man bolted into the night. When the last of them disappeared, Elias collapsed to his knees, breathing hard. Ava rushed to him, falling beside him, hands shaking as she touched his face. "You're hurt," she cried. "You shouldn't have." Elias grabbed in her trembling hands, pulling her close until their foreheads touched, both of them. Shaking from adrenaline and fear and something deeper neither could name. "I'm not letting them take you," he whispered, breath hot against her cheek. "Not now, not ever." Tears streamed down her face as she clung to him, feeling his heartbeat pounding against her chest, the world spinning around them. And in that broken, breathless moment, amid shattered furniture, blood on the floor, distant sirens, and the outline of danger still clinging to the air, Ava realized something terrifying and beautiful. Elias Ward wasn't just protecting her. He was fighting for her. And she wasn't just surviving. She was choosing to live. The day Ava Lockwood became someone new did not begin with triumph. It began with trembling nerves, a cold conference room, and the hum of fluorescent lights that made everything feel too sharp, too real, too close. She sat at a long federal table inside a secure Los Angeles courthouse. Clutching a cup of water she could barely drink, fingers trembling as they traced the condensation on the plastic rim. Across from her, prosecutors reviewed files, agents whispered to each other, and lawyers shuffled through endless paperwork. Yet somehow the room felt silent, as if holding its breath for her. Elias Ward stood a few feet behind her, hands, clasped chest still wrapped after the Malibu attack, but posture steady and unbreakable, as if daring the entire government to challenge her right to be here. Today was the special federal hearing where Ava would stand as the key witness who could dismantle Granite Equity Group's entire facade. Ava's voice had been stolen for months, buried under fear and threats, but now the entire room depended on her words. When the lead prosecutor approached, she offered Ava a warm, steady look. "You're the only one who can tell the truth," she said softly. "We will protect you, but we need you to be brave, brave." Ava had spent months believing she was nothing but property, a pawn, a thing Granite owned. She touched the faint mark near her ribs, the coded scar they had carved into her skin. For so long she had looked at that mark and seen chains, but today she wanted to see it as a reminder of what she had survived. She nodded slowly. "I'm ready." Elias exhaled quietly behind her, the sound low and full of relief. Agents opened the courtroom door, and the world outside exploded with camera flashes. Reporters crowded behind barricades, shouting questions about the billionaire and the mystery woman he was allegedly hiding. Elias stepped forward protectively until Ava touched his hand, calming him. "They're not here for you," she whispered. "They're here for the truth." For a moment he paused, eyes softening as he looked at her just long enough for her to feel the silent conversation between them. "You are not alone." Inside the courtroom, Granite's executives were lined up on one side, suits, crisp expressions, arrogant even in handcuffs. One man, Derek Vaughn, the head of the entire network, looked directly at Ava with a cold half-smile. A smile that once made her shrink. A smile that once ruled her life. But today she looked back with something stronger than fear. She looked back with purpose. When Ava stepped up to the witness stand, her knees wobbled, but she held onto the edge of the table until her body remembered how to stay upright. Elias stood at the far side of the room, eyes locked on her like a lighthouse through a storm. She raised her hand, swore to tell the truth, and began to speak. At first, her voice trembled, barely audible. She described the data laundering, the hidden warehouse, the coded branding used to mark victims, the lies fed to employees, the threats, the women who never made it out. She described the night she escaped barefoot, bleeding, running for her life. The room stayed silent except for the scratch of pens and the slow, controlled breathing of agents who knew this testimony was about to crack open a case that had eluded them for years. As she continued, her voice grew steadier, stronger, clearer. She watched as Granite's executives shifted uncomfortably. Derek Vaughn's half-smile faded. By the time she reached the part where Granite planned to use her as leverage in a government transaction, she saw genuine fear flicker across their faces. Not fear of her, but fear of what she represented. Fear of losing power. Fear of accountability. When she finished, the prosecutor nodded with profound respect. "Thank you, Miss Lockwood. You just made history." The judge ordered Granite's executives detained without bail. Several spectators gasped. A few reporters scribbled frantic notes, and Ava sat down, breath-steady chest, rising with something she had not felt in months' control. After the hearing, Ava stepped out onto the courthouse steps, sunlight warming her face. Cameras flashed, reporters called her name, but she heard none of it. What she heard was her heartbeat, calm, alive, free. Elias walked beside her, not touching her, letting her lead, letting her choose, but his presence wrapped around her like armor. She turned to him, eyes shining. "It's over," she whispered. "Yes," he said softly, "but your life is just beginning." Later that afternoon, Ava walked into a small, warm studio on Melrose Avenue, the appointment she had booked silently weeks ago, but never told Elias about. The tattoo artist, a gentlewoman with silver hair and soft eyes, greeted her with a comforting smile. "Are you sure about this?" she asked. Ava slipped off her hoodie and revealed the faint, ugly coded scar along her side. For a moment she stared at it, then she nodded. "I don't want to erase it," she said. "I want to rewrite it." The artist sketched a new design, a blooming magnolia branch, delicate and fierce, growing out of the scar. Underneath elegant script, "I choose me." As the needle began, Ava didn't flinch, not once. Each line felt like reclaiming a piece of herself. When she finished, Ava stepped outside into the fading afternoon light. Elias was waiting across the street, leaning against his car, watching her, as if she were a sunrise he didn't want to miss. She crossed over to him, slowly lifting the hem of her shirt, just enough to reveal the new tattoo. Elias's breath hitched, not out of desire, out of awe. "Ava," he whispered, voice thick. "That's beautiful. It's mine," she replied simply. She lowered her shirt and looked up at him. In her eyes he saw something he never expected to see again, hope. In his, she saw something she had feared she would never deserve, love. And in that quiet moment on a warm Los Angeles sidewalk, surrounded by traffic, distant sirens, and city lights flickering to life, Ava Lockwood finally understood. She hadn't just survived Granite, she had outgrown them. outlived them, overruled them. She had become someone new. 1 year later, the world looked nothing like the night Ava Lockwood stumbled barefoot and bleeding through the industrial rain, and yet every morning she woke up grateful that she remembered it, because remembering meant she had survived it, risen from it, and turned its darkness into the blueprint of her light. The Malibu coastline stretched out in a soft golden haze as the sun dropped toward the horizon, spreading warm amber across the deck of the small beachfront center that now served as the headquarters of the Unlocked Foundation, the non-profit Ava had built from nothing but pain, determination, and the promise she once whispered to herself in a penthouse bathroom mirror. No one will ever feel as alone as I did. Now the center buzzed with life women talking in circles of support, therapists guiding quiet conversations, volunteers unloading boxes of care supplies, and a giant mural on the front wall painted by survivors themselves, a blooming magnolia tree breaking through concrete. Ava stood barefoot on the deck's salt wind, lifting the ends of her hair, watching the waves with a soft smile that came easily these days, not forced, not fragile, but steady and alive. She wore a white sundress, simple and loose, and beneath it the tattoo on her ribcage. Her reclaiming peeked faintly through the fabric as she breathed. Behind her she heard footsteps she knew better than her own heartbeat. Elias Ward walked onto the deck, wearing a gray sweater and rolled sleeves, his hair tousled by the wind, the faintest shadow of a beard along his jaw. He looked softer these days, not in weakness, but in presence, like he finally allowed himself to exist in a world that did not require him to fight every second to protect someone he loved. Ava turned toward him, eyes warm. "You're early," she teased. Elias shrugged, his expression gentle. "I like seeing you before the world takes your attention." She stepped closer, and he offered his hand, not grabbing, not claiming, simply offering. She slipped hers into it and felt that familiar grounded warmth run through her body, a reminder of every moment he had stood by her side. They walked slowly along the deck toward the beach stairs, passing volunteers, cleaning up after the day's events. Several waved. Ava smiled, and Elias nodded politely. He preferred staying in the background, quietly funding operations, quietly protecting the organization from legal and digital threats, quietly loving her without making the world know it. When they reached the sand, Ava stopped, letting the cold grains slip between her toes. The sky glowed orange, then pink. She tilted her head toward him. "Do you remember the first night, every second of it?" Elias answered, voice low. "You fell against my car like the world was ending." "It was ending," she said softly. "Or at least I thought it was." She paused, then added with a faint smile, "And you looked at me like you didn't understand why anyone would think you were the danger." He huffed a laugh, rubbing the back of his neck. "Yeah, that moment confused the hell out of me." Her smile faded into something tender, almost fragile. "Do you know what I thought when I saw you?" Elias shook his head. "Tell me." Ava stepped closer until the ocean breeze shifted her dress against his legs. "I thought I was begging the wrong man to kill me. I thought you were there to finish what they started." Elias swallowed hard, jaw-tensing eyes, darkening with the old ache he never spoke about. "Ava," she placed a hand on his chest right over his heartbeat. "But you didn't. You knelt. You listened. You told me I was safe." Her voice dropped to a whisper. No one had ever said that to me without lying. Elias covered her hand with his own. "I meant it," he said, steady as stone. "I meant every syllable." He drew in a breath, as if remembering something that had lived unspoken between them for a year. Back then, when you whispered, "Make it fast," I thought you were asking me to end your pain. But then I looked at you, and all I wanted was to show you how it feels to live. Ava's eyes glistened as she whispered, and you did. A wave crashed nearby, sending cool mist across their legs, and she leaned her forehead against his chest. "I'm safe now," she murmured. Elias wrapped his arms around her waist, pulling her into the warmth of his body, holding her like she was the only gravity he recognized. "Always," he said into her hair. They stayed like that for a long moment, the world shrinking to ocean breath and heartbeat, till Ava pulled back with a soft laugh. "Come on," she said. "There's something I want to show you." She led him back up the deck stairs, slipping inside the foundation center until they reached a hallway lined with photograph survivors, smiling, rebuilding, reclaiming their lives. At the end of the hall hung a large framed image. Ava stepped aside so Elias could see it. The photo showed a blurry nighttime shot of the exact moment she collapsed onto his Maybach hood. Drenched in rain, eyes full of terror, his silhouette stepping out of the car. Beneath it, a brass plate read, "The moment she chose to live." Elias froze, taken aback by the magnitude of it. Ava touched his arm gently. "I put it here because I want every woman who comes through these doors to know one thing, that the worst night of your life can also be the beginning of the best one." Elias turned to her emotion, tightening his voice. "Ava, you turned your trauma into a lighthouse." She smiled softly. "I just followed the hand that reached for me." Again she placed her palm over his heart. "This one." Elias bent his head and kissed her slow, reverent warm, not a rescue, not a promise of safety, but something deeper. A future chosen freely. Outside, the sun dipped into the ocean, painting the sky in gold and rose. Ava leaned into him, breathing the moment in. She was not property, not prey, not a witness, not a survivor defined by scars. She was Ava Lockwood, loved, living, safe, for real. If Ava and Elias's journey touched your heart today, then before you go, take a moment to breathe with me right here, right now. Because stories like this one are not just entertainment, they are reminders that even in a world that feels relentless, someone out there might be living a chapter they never asked for, fighting battles no one sees, or searching for a hand that tells them they are worth saving. If you believe in second chances, if you believe that love can grow in the places where fear once lived, if you believe that even the coldest hearts can thaw when they finally meet someone who sees them, then please like this video so more people can discover Ava's transformation. Leave a comment telling us where you are watching from. I absolutely love seeing our community come together from all over the United States and around the world, from small towns to big cities, from quiet apartments to busy kitchens where someone might be listening while cooking dinner. And if this story made you feel anything, hope, courage, softness, or that tiny ache in your chest, when two people who were never supposed to cross paths finally find their way to each other, then share it with someone who might need it today. Maybe a friend who is going through something heavy. Maybe someone who believes they are too broken to be loved. Maybe someone who just needs a reminder that they are not alone. And if you want more stories like this, more billionaire romances filled with emotional tension, slow burn healing, protective intensity, and the kind of love that rises from the darkest moments, then hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell. because tomorrow's story is already being written, and trust me, you do not want to miss it. This channel is more than a place for storytelling. It is a community of people who believe in kindness, humanity renewal, and the spark that happens when two souls collide in the right moment, even if it begins in chaos. So drop a red heart in the comments if you believe that scars do not define us and that every survivor deserves a future brighter than their past. Drop 2 hearts if you believe that real love does not rescue you. It reminds you of your own strength. And if you have ever lived through something difficult and come out the other side, even shakily, even imperfectly, just know that your story matters here. You matter here. Thank you for watching, for feeling with us, and for being part of a family that celebrates courage, hope, and healing. I will see you in the next story where another heart learns that it was never too broken to be loved.